Benjamin Chilcott, our chairman, who will moderate a panel of very exciting speakers, but I'll leave it to him to introduce them while we are quickly arranging the setup.
Thanks, Alex. Is this going to be a little bit like those old Big Brothers when I name them one at a time and they come rushing out of the audience? We've got a quick time check. Perfect. We're on time, so we've got about half an hour. So, without further ado, our three panelists. The first, James Bidwell. Up you come, sir. James runs a business called Springwise, and James is the CEO of the world's largest innovation ideas spotting network. So I don't know if you've heard of Springwise or signed up to Springwise, but please do. But every day I get sent 3 brand new innovations that are out there somewhere in the world. So I think you have somewhere in the region of 17,000 spotters, is that right? 19,000 spotters, forgive me, those 2,000 I missed. And as an example, you guys discovered Facebook, Bitcoin, Snapchat, and so they only publish things that have not been published anywhere else before. I think I'm right in saying that. Ideally, he says. Prior to that, James was 20 years as a retailer, so worked for in senior positions, amongst others, in Disneyland, Paris, Selfridges, and others amongst that. Secondly, Craig, if I could, Craig standing at the end. So Craig runs his own blog now called retail-innovation.com. He's an expert at the strategy and delivery of in-store digital promotions, making his name at Marks and Spencer's as the driving force behind the delivery of the in-store digital pilots. We're very lucky to have Craig with us here today. He, if I don't know how many of you read his blog, but he is a constant blogger. He described it earlier as a hobby, which, frankly, if you can make your hobby your business, I think you're in a very lucky space. But Craig has similarly a very long-standing relationship with retail, having worked for the likes of M&S over a number of years. And finally, already stepping on the stage earlier, we have Jemima Bird. I haven't brought my glasses with me, but luckily I know all about Jemima, and so I'm not going to have to squint at the page. Jemima has spent time in senior positions at the likes of Co-op, Strada, which is a restaurant chain with the likes of Café Rouge, Bella Italia, Belgo, and Strada. I'd actually say it was called Tragus, not Strada, wasn't it? Tragus Group. She then, as we know, was at Moss Bros as the ops director. But the truth is, the reason that I am in love with Jemima is that she's the first woman ever to be on the committee of the Yorkshire County Cricket Club, and knows more about cricket than I do, and I know more about cricket than anyone else I know other than Jemima. So without further ado, I have an opening question to start with, and just thinking from a logistics perspective, I will have to pass the microphone over to you. So we'll probably do it left to right if everyone's comfortable with that. So as a starting question, we just wanted to ask what recent success stories have you guys heard in innovation within the retail world? So Jemima, if I could pass this over to you.
Great, thanks. I should start by saying that I ran the New York Marathon a couple of weeks ago, so this is the reason why this story is front of mind. I did it absolutely appallingly, but I managed to drag myself around. But what was really interesting is I'd signed up to the ASICS website to basically follow a training program and log my gear on that site. I'm sure many of you have. And when I was in New York, being a retail junkie, I particularly saw the New York Marathon this year had some great funky branding, and they brought out their trainers in this great funky branding saying, get your New York on, and this basically graffiti splattered ASICs. And so I thought to myself, right, if I get around this marathon, I'll go and buy myself some to basically walk. I didn't make the mistake of buying some pre the marathon and running in them. And so I subsequently did that. And what was really interesting is because they have basically a yReceipts program over there as well, and I linked my purchase, I immediately got an email notification back saying, this is the amount of time or how many miles I've got left in my new ASICs based against my old ASICs. And I thought that was a really cool piece of kit to basically say, you've got another 200 miles, but then you need to come back and buy some more. And I thought, that's a great bit of, forward-thinking branding and intuitive. And it also said, congratulations on running the New York Marathon, which I thought was quite sweet. So that's quite cool.
I think that's a pretty good achievement, running the New York Marathon. Congratulations. So that's a huge question. What recent retail innovation have I seen? I mean, we see retail innovation coming through every day. And when we publish 3, we see about 50 ideas. So if I may, I talk a little bit about themes. So we're looking a lot at, we're seeing a lot about the Internet of Things. We're seeing devices that talk to each other, talk to retailers. It won't be long before your washing machine needs a new part and it communicates it directly to the supplier of that part, and that part just arrives in the post. We're seeing, linked to that, a lot around the home as the retail channel. A lot of robots, some rather amusing and others rather scary. So there's a lot of this stuff where technology is enabling businesses to get to consumers without consumers really even having to intervene. Now that's right. We look at the outliers and we look at what entrepreneurs are doing. So we're kind of quite extreme. And the question, of course, for all of us retailers, or some of us former retailers, is how does that make us money, and how do we kind of really capitalize on all this stuff that's coming out there? And there's a massive stuff in the startup world that is never going to make any money, and there's a lot of money being invested in all of that stuff. So I think the question is, how do there's a lot of innovation out there, but how do you put it into the business? And what I've been incredibly impressed with this morning is that you are showing live case studies of fantastic innovation and ideas which are driving business to retailers. And I think it's easy to kind of think that we're everyone's doing this, but they're not. And actually the best practice that we've seen in the case studies today is right out there as kind of, it's cutting edge, but it's implemented, and that's the encouraging thing. So, and I think that's kind of where I put it, and that's the yReceipts, the way customers are going, mobile, technology enabling amazing customer experience. That's what we're talking about today, which is fantastic.
Cool. I'll talk about 2 examples. One I was involved in, and one I've spotted out there. I suppose the first one was I guess back in 2010 when the iPad had just come out. I was at M&S, and we were thinking about, well, when we go into a store, we see a very different experience to what we see online. So we had all this great data online, but in the store you'd go in there, and the colleagues wouldn't even know the latest range that they were now selling. So we thought, actually, well, the iPad's out there, the battery lasts all day. Colleagues can hold them in their hands, and they can go and serve customers with the breadth of information that you have online. So you can have cross-sell, upsell, your ratings and reviews. So we put that out there in 2010. We were probably the first to do kind of iPad rollout. And we ended up over 4 years iterating this. That's one of the stories, I guess, is a lot of people were throwing technology into store and just leaving it and abandoning it. What we did is we built a team around it. And the big stat that came out of it was only last year, 20% of all M&S.com revenue was coming through these 1,400 iPads. So you've got 70,000 store staff in M&S stores in the UK, and 1,400 devices, but 20% of your revenue. Now some of that's cannibalising from the desk that was kind of stuck in the corner of the 3rd floor in Marble Arch. And if you take that store as an example, so some was cannibalisation, but a lot of it was actually, if you give colleagues devices, you empower colleagues with information, they can be very, very good at selling. So I'm surprised that I've left M&S in October last year. I'm surprised we haven't rolled out, that they didn't roll out more than 1400, because it's clearly successful. I guess the next evolution of that would be putting a device in everyone's pocket and also putting applications on people's own devices who work for the store. The second innovation, I quite like a company, one of the startups in London called True Rating, I think. So what they do is on the chip and pin device, when you're typing in your PIN, just before you do that, you rate your experience. You answer a question, you give it like a 1 to 5 rating. So it's kind of a bit like yReceipts, a very effortless integration into your hard to change point of sale system. What they say is they've got about 80% of people actually do answer the question. So you get some great data about your customer satisfaction in the store. So those are two examples. One that I kind of created, and the other one which I've observed. Brilliant. Thank you. I'll take it back.
Excellent. So I'd like to throw it out now to the audience. And I guess the way that we'll probably do this is just to make sure everyone hears the question. If you put the question to me, I will then repeat it and pass the microphone over. So does anyone have any questions they would like to ask of the panel? Daniel.
I'm interested in what the panel thinks around how businesses manage innovation and new exciting stuff with not losing track of day-to-day business.
Okay, so interestingly, if you hadn't have asked the question, my second question here was pretty much that. So very quickly, just to paraphrase, repeat what Dan said, how do businesses manage the implementation and engagement in innovation and new startups with making sure they don't take the eye off the ball of today's sales, tomorrow's sales, this week's sales?
That's a great question, actually. I've just finished a 6-month piece with Trainline, helping them reposition and rebrand their business. And they've got masses of data coming at them. They basically aggregate all of the ticket sales, all of the transport information from National Rail, and they crunch that information through. So some of the really cool stuff that they can do is, if you look at your Trainline app, it will tell you what platform your train is going to depart from 60 seconds before it will come up on the screen. So instead of looking up at the screen, you can look at your app, and you can be there 60 seconds before, so you're going to get a seat on the train much quicker. Everybody else can do that, just nobody else has thought of doing it yet. They also can do things like they know that the train's running late, so they can send you a push notification to say, your train's running 15 minutes late, have an extra 5 minutes in bed, or grab that coffee on the way to the station, because you have time, because they know it's 15 minutes late. And this is all funky and cool, and everybody is running around in Trainline like you can't believe, coming up with these types of ideas and how we can push notifications. Fundamentally, the number one complaint and challenge that Trainline have is, why are you charging me £2 to book through you when I can actually go direct to another operator? So actually, when it comes down to it, customers really do just want the basics doing right. They want the app to be working well. They want the ticket price to be fair, and they want they want to be able to get mobile data or mobile ticketing to their phone. And so Trainline have had to sort of have a whole innovation suite that are just really pushing on that and come up with the super cool, sexy stuff. But fundamentally, they now have a core team back on how can we remove the £2 booking fee, how can we make sure everybody is mobile app enabled, and so we can push your phone to you, and basically how can we ensure we get the best prices to you. So I think it's about having a balance and understanding sexy is great, but actually basics is where we have to be.
Very good question. Thank you. We spend a lot of time helping companies think about innovation and innovation culture. I think the answer to the question is highly complicated, but there are 3 key tenets. The first is around leadership. The second is around culture. And the third is, interestingly, around ownership. So I think if you look at what Nick Wheeler's done with Charles Tyrwhitt, for example, I remember him selling shirts to his mates at university a long time ago, and he has continued to innovate in that business, and look at what you guys have been talking about today. But he's done it in the context of a private business. He doesn't have people who are, taking a much more short-term view. He is, on a quarterly basis and results and all of that kind of stuff. So I think the entrepreneur is the innovator, and everything he does in his business is around kind of encouraging that culture of innovation, which allows people to do it. So that's kind of one way of doing it. In bigger public companies, leadership is massively important in terms of encouraging people to be lateral and think differently. And we're seeing that a lot of businesses who are sort of trying to do innovation labs and all of this kind of stuff and get into with startups, and the culture clash is so difficult that those collaborations often don't work. But the entrepreneur definitely has a massive role to play in this kind of whole debate of how to encourage businesses to innovate, and having businesses like yReceipts on the edges who are independent and are innovating themselves and then integrating them with bigger businesses like MasterCard, for example, kind of gets a blend. So I think it's, how do you behave, how do you think about life, and how do you kind of drive that culture of innovation, which comes always from the top, and it doesn't come from being owned by the public markets, unfortunately, or rarely does.
So I guess I've got a story from M&S. So when I joined, I was talked into joining M&S. I wasn't really up for it. And I was in a pub one night, and he said that we're about to spend lots of money on a load of digital stuff, millions and millions. We ended up probably spending in my time there, about 250 million on just digital. So quite a lot of money was going to be spent. So I thought that'd be quite interesting. But fundamentally, I thought, it would be reporting into a technology team, IT, so old school corporate IT. So I guess the first few years there, I was kind of in the naughty corner quite a lot, disrupting, just doing stuff that was, if you think about IT, your IT director and your typical big corporate retailer is, he's normally reporting to the FD, and he's measured on don't break it, because if the till breaks then the whole business falls apart, and generally don't do it cheap, don't spend lots of money. So innovation kind of isn't really compatible with the old IT director. So was getting in the naughty corner a lot until a point where in came Laura Way-Gerry, who was our head of multi-channel, and she'd kind of obviously realised that you had to, if you didn't disrupt in digital, you were going to fall behind. So she kind of she liked the stuff we were doing. I talked about the iPad experience, and it spoke for itself. The kind of revenue we were generating through these devices. We did a bunch of different digital things in store. So what ended up happening is she left she just wanted to detach kind of multi-channel from the kind of the main IT, and have the IT do what they do well, which is keep things working. So the point of sale, the stuff that doesn't really change that frequently, and the reporting, leave it over there, and then carved off the kind of the customer and digital. We ended up doing a kind of a big program where quite well-known program where we re-platformed all of M&S off Amazon onto our own kind of in-house platform. And we did that kind of waterfall because there were too many suppliers to kind of do it any other way. And then as soon as we went live, a couple of months later, we kind of transformed delivery into full agile. So where you build product teams around every kind of main feature of your website, all the processes around merchandising content, etc., through to kind of the call center. Everything became kind of fully agile. So it was iterative. And the main culture that was embraced was learning that failure is actually good, which is kind of the opposite to what when I was originally recruited. It was about do it safe. This was all about embracing failure, which is, I think there's a good stat at Amazon around like 85% of experiments actually fail. But the trick is to learn when to learn when you've got a failure and to abandon it, to detach your emotional value and to learn that it's a failure and to abandon and move on to the next experiment. So adopting kind of an experimentation. We wouldn't have really done the iPad thing if it was an experiment. We just thought, well, we've got this kiosk over here, put it on an iPad and see what happens when you give it to a colleague. And it was an experiment. We didn't know what would happen. So loads of experiments, some successful, some not so. The biggest thing I also learnt was don't change the customer journey. Enhance the customer journey, but the customer's in the store for the same reason they were doing it 100 years ago, which is they're either there to find something or they're there to touch and feel and browse physical product. So don't try and put all these kind of clever little technologies in there where you're disrupting the customer journey. Just enhance the customer journey, and that probably took about a couple of years to learn that the hard way. So that's kind of my story from my time at M&S.
It's coming around.
Yeah.
If I could just add to that one thing, we had a similar event to this last year where a guy called Simon Burke, who is the ex-CEO of Superquinn, chairman of Majestic Wines, chairman of Hobbycraft, and chairman of Bath Store he's none of those things now, but he has been. He was asked a similar question as a retailer, and he said, well, actually, I'm also the chairman, or had been the chairman, of a business called Eagle Eye. And he said, our first 3 clients at Eagle Eye were MFI, Woolworths, and another business that went bust very quickly. And he said the reason that they worked with them is because they'd got to a point where they didn't, they'd try anything. And he said most of the organisations they were talking to were just way too conservative. But actually, I think we're seeing a turning of that tide. And Craig's point about fail and fail fast is a really interesting one. That on the kind of services side of the fence, we try and push that mantra: try stuff, fail. Make sure you're not going to bring down your whole system, clearly, but give it a go. Another question here, please.
It was just really to get some tips from the panel on how a startup can deal with large companies and enterprise. So you touched on it slightly there, but we're looking from the other point of view. A lot of big retailers have got innovation labs. Some of them are doing it because they have a genuine business need to build. Some of them are doing it because they feel they have to. I think we were part of one of the latter because that didn't then lead to anything in production afterwards. So my question is, what are your tips for startups when dealing with enterprise, and how can you get in with enterprise when you've got a solution which you feel can really enhance what they do?
Okay, so quickly to paraphrase that, tips on how startup businesses can work with large enterprise retailers, and one of the specific points you mentioned, specifically when they have things like their own startup labs, as we know John Lewis does, and a few others. How can you when you have a product that you think will make a difference, how can you gain traction with those organisations?
Here's a challenging one, is the straight answer to that. Half the time it is about just completely bombarding and networking and getting into the individual and identifying who the person in that organisation that you can actually talk to. The example I have isn't actually a tech product. I was bombarded by 3 young guys who have a product for iPhone cases. Anybody can come see my phone later, which basically the number one problem that millennials have is they lose their headphones. They leave their headphones around, they leave them on desk, or you get them out of your pocket and they're all tangled up. And so we designed a case where basically the headphone screws back into the iPhone, and it's really no thicker than a normal iPhone case. It's a genius product. And they've sofa surfed for 2 years. They've literally lived on mate sofas, and they're ex-P&G grads, and they just identified myself, and they literally just kept on sending me this product. Every other day. They tried everything. And eventually I just gave in, and I said, come and have a meeting with me. To such an extent that once they got in there, their mantra is, if we can get in front of you, you'll like this product. And I'm now an investor in this particular piece. They did exactly the same with Richard Branson to get into his innovation lab. They literally went and camped outside his office every day. They worked out his patterns when he was coming in and out, where he was going. They eventually got into his innovation lab by going into the kitchen of a restaurant where they knew he was working in, and acted as a waiter to get the product onto his table. So, there's a little bit of, mine's probably slightly different to what the guys are going to say here, but there is nothing about good old-fashioned grandstanding and guerrilla tactics in the right way that can get you in front of the right people.
That's a great answer. So I think we work with a lot of big businesses, and we're not a very big business. We have a lot of reach, but what I find is it's a human thing, as always. It's like, what do these guys need? Everyone is talking about, we've got to be an innovation. Probably at every board meeting, innovation comes up, 25 times, and everyone's shit scared, and the CEO's going around saying it, but they don't know quite what to do. So we provide a solution for that. You can work with Springwise, and therefore we'll help you innovate. And I think the problem, one of the other problems, is there's so many startups. You walk around, Silicon Roundabout, and everyone's in a startup, and probably, over 50% of them are not really very good. I see so many pitches. We do some work on helping fund startups, and you see so many pitches that are just awful. And so if you're a big business, you've got to be really selective, because your time is the only asset that's important, really. So again, I think back to that sort of human engagement. PR is useful, to be talked about and written about, and then you can show that, it gives credibility. It's all that kind of old school stuff, but it's humans, really, isn't it? And trying to engage with people, and also to admit when, you're not going to get through. And there might be, someone else you should be talking. The good news is there's lots of people to talk to. And I have to say that, and I've tracked what Alex has done, and he should probably be answering this question, because he does engage brilliantly with businesses, and you see a superb, relaxed but very confident performance of a man who's got a great business. And the product is also very, very critical to all of this.
So I used to be one of those people walking around trying to spot technologies. I've probably signed, I don't know, in my time at M&S, I was there 5 years, probably about 15 different kind of SaaS-based companies of different sizes, from the kind of the Adobes all the way down to kind of the small companies that were turning over maybe 5 million. So I guess to make yourself visible, you've got to have something good to show. There's a lot of people that come up with technologies who generally think they're going to work, but haven't actually tested it in a retail, have no real live case studies. So one way to address that, I guess what I did is I've always been supplier side. I now work for a company called Ampliant. Some people may know. I've got some customers are here, but I actually selected Ampliant. How I got to know the guys at Ampliant was I selected Ampliant when I was back at M&S, and what we at the time we kind of you're looking around for some people who are being disruptive, who have a great vision. So if you're out there communicating a great vision and you're communicating it to your network, then I'd say use your network quite a lot, because your network are the influencers, the system integrators, the different channel partners you could have who get your word out there, because you can't do it with your kind of tiny little sales team and the CEO. You need to get your kind of your partners out there, as Alex is doing, right, with yReceipts. So have a great technology that you validated and use your influence. If you have a great technology, then you tell your network, and your network will spread the word for you. So sometimes it's good to get people in from retail into your business. So I deliberately went and studied for 5 years in M&S. I didn't want to work for a big corporate retailer, as I said, but I've now come back on supplier side with loads of insight on how people make decisions in retailers. And it's not always about selecting the right technology. Sometimes there's just a lot of politics in there, and you have to understand people's agendas. And it's complicated, especially in the big ones. That way, yeah.
We've been in a lot of trouble by now.
Excellent. I think we've probably got time for maybe 2 more questions. So, gentlemen, just there.
So I've got a tactical question around the customer journey, and I'd be interested to know whether you'd recommend putting the actual ratings and review message within the actual e-receipt itself, or would you send it as a follow-up communication, and what would be the benefits?
Okay, so a tactical question. Would you put a FIFO review Trustpilot style question into the electronic receipt itself?
We actually thought about that at Moss Bros quite a lot, and we decided to ensure that you had a follow-on conversation to split it. But what we did do through yReceipts is we had an immediate, how was your experience today? So a really, a very generic, high-level sort of MPS type question, smiley face, sad face. So you got from an immediacy of response, we could understand how the customer was interacting and what that experience was within store. But also from a customer perspective, they were feeling quite warm about the fact, well, I may have had a good experience or a bad experience, but at least I'm being asked what that experience was and could respond to that. The reason then we followed that up with FIFO was so that there was that sort of time delay for the customer to get home, embrace the product. I mean, from a Moss Bros perspective, it's obviously a suit. Was that fit right? Did it actually feel right when I got it home? Did it go with the things that I wanted it to go with? And then respond to that. And we felt that enabled a much more, a longer term conversation and something to more embed rather than the immediacy of all in one. But that was our response.
I'm totally unqualified to answer that question, but I would only suggest maybe you should try it and see what happens.
I'd probably echo that as well. I mean, it's not been. Has it been tried before? It's.
Yeah. That's exactly what you say. So I think the main difference. I'm sure we'll ask the question. The main difference is really you haven't used the product when you get it in the receipt. the receipt arrives instantly, and instantly you can ask the question, how do you like the experience right now in this store? But you can't really ask the question, does the shirt fit? Are the shoes comfortable? So it's a relation between product and question, really. That's what Mossbros has done in early times, exactly the combination. And starting to engage with the customer and also change the experience slightly compared to walking on with a paper receipt where you have to go on a website, type in a code.
Just to build on that, so where you can do immediacy is obviously in places like restaurants, because obviously you've tasted the product. The only challenge with it, we tried this at Tragus within Strada, did some immediate sort of customer feedback in terms of the experience they'd had. What you understand very quickly from a restaurant perspective is most people who are dining on an evening have had some wine, and so your experience is fundamentally flawed by the amount of alcohol they had. So you get very honest, it was great or it was utterly shit experience. So again, immediacy of feedback is sometimes it's useful, but you have to take it in the context in which it's operated. So we again at Tragus, we actually took that out because we felt it was probably clouded.
It's the wine. I love that story. I won't give stats because I'm not sure what stats I'm allowed to give, but actually Mothercare as well do that did you have a good experience thing today. And as I understand it, the amazing thing about it is they now have a way of driving customer experience KPIs in store that you never really had before, because you're able to say you need to get X% of people smiley face versus not, and it is an instant thing, which is amazing. Alex has just given me the nod, which says one more question. So do we have one more question from the audience? Is there anybody out there? He said one more question and there are no more hands. Sorry, you have a quick point. I'll pass you the microphone.
Just to add to the service reviews, we found we did have an old-fashioned way of doing it at Mothercare. With we used to give them like a little postcard thing saying please fill out the reviews, and as soon as we put yReceipts in, we actually found that our review scores dropped, and it's because you can't fake that. Actually, stores can cherry pick the happy customers and say please fill this out, and they get really good scores, whereas now there's a much more level playing field. So initially your KPIs are like, oh god, they've gone down, but actually it's real customers now and we can act on that much better. So that was a big change in the business as well. And then finally the other bit on product reviews is you've got to look at when the product gets used. So actually restaurants, I've consumed that product right now. Pregnant, I'm not going to use it for 2 months. Christmas, I'm not going to use it for 2 months. So we're actually pausing our reviews from I think next week until after Christmas now as well.
And just add to that, it's a great example that relates to the second question I think Dan asked. So what you guys have done there is you've realized something is not working, let's change it. And not in our PowerPoint presentations, the plan was to do it this way and then stick to it. So that was a great example for having the combination of a culture and team and understanding and monitoring what you're doing and then reacting to it. And now it's a success. So it's a great example for what you guys spoke about earlier.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I thought there was one hand just going up. There is a quick question. So this is the last question.
So I look pretty positive provider into Tier 1, to Marks and Spencer's, John Lewis, etc., but also in the digital channel world. One of the challenges I see is that there's still a lot of silos in these big Tier 1 businesses between operational teams and digital teams. How long do you think that is going to continue?
Okay, so very quickly for everybody, big businesses still tend to work in silos. Specifically, the example there was given between physical retail operations and e-commerce operations as an example. And how long do we think before these barriers are going to be broken down? Are they already being broken down, and where do you see it?
Yeah, no, it is a great question. When I went into Mossbros, I initially went in to do a 6-month brand consultancy piece, and then the first half of my career was as I was an operator. The second half of my career was an accidental marketeer. So the chairman said, would I operationalise the strategy? And so I stayed for 18 months being a commercial operations director, so being responsible for all the brand, the marketing, the creative, and also the store teams. And believe me, the turf wars between marketing departments and operations departments are huge. And so the only reason we managed to get the entire sort of strategy implemented across 140 stores was because, frankly, I was both the marketing director and the operations director, and it made it happen. However, over here we had the e-commerce director, and trying to get the sort of digital and stores talking as one was nigh on impossible. And hence, yReceipts and FIFO definitely helped in terms of making the stores feel that those pesky little e-com people over there, that were only 5% of the business, but were getting 100% of the resource, were taking all their sales. It did at least manage to get them talking. My honest view, and this isn't happening at Mossbros as yet, is that until e-com and operations is under one functional head for the sales, it will never happen. So the only reason we got the brand marketing rolled out in Mossbros in the way we did and saw 22% like-for-likes, 8% brand equity, was because I was responsible for both running the stores and the brand and marketing within them. If I was responsible for the e-com, then we'd had a joined up e-com site as well. So e-com was brilliant, stores was brilliant, together they were utterly dreadful.
So I think similar kind of vein, it's leadership and culture. It's when I launched Anthropologie in Europe, we launched it with a capital city strategy, but all the stores were designed to drive e-commerce, and we were driving customers, so we put the customer in the middle of it, and that was what we did, and we didn't have different people doing different things. And so thinking about the customer, thinking about how you're best serving the customer, thinking about how technology enables it. I worry about big old retail beasts. I think they are. And I worry about the statistic that 85% of transactions happen in stores, because that's not in every category, for sure. And I think there is massive disruption on the way. There is a lot of overhead that is just not being optimized, and there are a lot of people who've been sitting in these businesses for 30-odd years doing their nice job and don't want to change, waiting for their pension. And I think the disruption that is happening, and you look at what Uber's done to the taxi market globally, look at what Alibaba's doing, look at what Airbnb, none of those guys have stock of any kind. And that's why the innovation space is so exciting. But I do think there's massive change required fast, and I think there will be some big shocks.
I guess you're PCMS, yeah? Yeah, so with a company like, I'll take M&S as an example because that's recent, is you just start at the top of the organisation and then work your way down. I mean, if you've got separate people on the board responsible for the same thing that you're trying to bring together, then start with CEO and work down. With M&S, you're okay. You've got Laura Wageri, so you start with her and work your way down. As long as you've got something compelling to say, and you get it in one paragraph, then you hopefully be able to get your message across, and then she can then cascade it. But yeah, if for those organisations that are completely separate and siloed, it's much harder. Yeah, I agree with what's been said already.
Excellent. Well, I guess just finally to say thank you very much to everyone for coming today. As far as the presentations go, I guess we need to double check with the owners of the presentations whether or not we can share those, and if we can, if there are bits that aren't allowed to be shared. But we really do genuinely appreciate all of you who have turned up and got here for an 8 a.m. Or 9 a.m. kickoff, but 8 a.m. Networking. And I hope you have enjoyed the day. And if there is anything specifically you would like to follow up on, if there's anyone you didn't get a chance to talk to, or you kind of just met in the corridor, as it were, please feel free to drop any one of us a line and ask the question. And I'm sure we can facilitate or answer a question or facilitate an ongoing introduction.